Hi, my name is Dylan O'Connor, and I'm a project manager for the professional services team here at Rubrik. Today, I'd like to discuss best practices on how to engage with Rubrik PSO and best practices on implementation project planning. We will also dive into Rubrik's installation requirements and take a look at the Rubrik pre-installation workbook. First, I'd like to discuss Rubrik's professional service offerings. We currently have two PSO offerings, RBK Install and RBK Consult. RBK Install covers an on-site implementation of up to 4 bricks at a single site. This includes deployment and a knowledge transfer training session that will enable our customers to operationalize Rubrik into their environment. Once the deployment is complete and customer is enabled, Rubrik provides a custom implementation summary outlining the work completed and any next steps. RBK Consult is Rubrik's on-site residency service offering. Rubrik and our partners will work closely with customers to determine a scope of work, develop a custom project plan, and deliver that scope based on the customer's timeline. This includes advanced configurations, automation integration, continued training sessions, and much more. If you have any questions on how to scope PSO, please contact the PSO Ops team via email at pso-ops@rubrik.com or on the PSO Ops Slack channel. Now we will talk about best practices on how to engage with Rubrik PSO. First, a tailored pre-installation workbook should be delivered to the customer. This workbook covers all the prerequisite information needed for the Rubrik installation. We'll take a look at the pre-installation workbook at the end of the call to go into more detail, but at a high level, prior to sending to the customer, the workbook should be customized, meaning all non-relevant sheets should be removed, and the first page should be populated, as it contains all internal project information. The Rubrik SE should then assist the customer with filling out the workbook, ensuring the requirements are clear. Once the customer has completed the workbook, the Rubrik SE should then send an introductory email to the appropriate theater group, introducing the customer to the PSO team. At that point, the PSO team will then manage deployment, schedule resources, and conduct the customer knowledge transfer. Once we receive an introductory email, we will then engage with the customer to schedule a pre-installation planning call. On this call, we will review the pre-installation workbook details, discuss and agree upon the proposed implementation plan, and confirm site readiness. Once site readiness has been confirmed, we can then schedule a date for the installation. Please keep in mind we have a 2-week lead time for scheduling, and this lead time starts from the date we have confirmed site readiness. The assigned Rubrik field engineer will then go on site to deliver the agreed upon implementation plan. Once the install has been completed, the Rubrik FE will then deliver an implementation summary outlining the work completed and any next steps. At this point, the account responsibility will be transferred back to the account team and support. And just an FYI, this process is also outlined on the FE wiki page. Now I'd like to take a minute to focus on the process for partner-led installations. Very similar to Rubrik-led installations, first, the partner should deliver a tailored pre-installation workbook to the customer. This workbook covers all the prerequisite information needed for the Rubrik installation. We will take a look at the pre-installation workbook at the end of the call to go into more detail, but at a high level, the workbook should be customized, meaning all non-relevant sheets should be removed, and the first page should be populated, as it contains all internal project information. The partner team should then assist the customer with filling out the workbook, ensuring the requirements are clear. Once the workbook is complete, we recommend you engage with the customer to schedule a pre-installation planning call. On this call, partners should review the pre-installation workbook details, discuss and agree upon the proposed implementation plan, and confirm site readiness. Once site readiness has been confirmed, partners can then schedule a date for the installation. Now we'll talk about the rack and power requirements for the Rubrik installation. Each brick requires 2 U and rack space with the dimensions listed on this slide. Each brick has dual power supplies that auto range from 100 to 240 volts in power. We do require both power supplies to be connected, so please ensure the customer has enough power outlets available in their PDUs to support 2 power connections per brick. Rubrik provides 2 of both the hooded and the standard 3-prong power cables in the box with each brick. Now we'll talk about the cabling requirements for a Rubrik installation. The diagram to the left shows the back of a Rubrik brick. The top is a diagram of the full 2U appliance with 4 individual nodes and dual power supplies. The bottom is a blow-up of a single node within that brick. Each node requires one 1 gigabit IPMI connection, which requires one Cat5 or Cat6 cable per node. Each node also requires a minimum of one 10 gigabit data management connection. For cabling, we have 2 options. One LC to LC fiber cable and 2 10 gigabit SR SFP transceivers per node, and that's one SFP for the brick side and one SFP for the switch side, or one passive twin-X cable per node. Rubrik has the capability for redundant 10 gigabit connections, protecting from a switch or switch port failure. If the customer decides to go with full redundancy, they will need either 2 LC to LC fiber cables and 4 10 gig SR SFP transceivers per node, and that's 2 SFPs for the brick side, 2 SFPs for the switch side, or 2 passive twin-X cables per node. Now we'll talk about the switch port requirements for a Rubrik installation. Rubrik requires one 1 gigabit switch port per Rubrik node to be available for IPMI connections. Rubrik also requires a minimum of one 10 gigabit switch port per Rubrik node to be available. As discussed before, Rubrik has the capability for redundant 10 gigabit data management connections per node. If the customer has decided to go with full redundancy, that will require a minimum of 2 10 gigabit switch ports per Rubrik node. Something to note, the 10 gigabit ports are configured as an active-passive bond on the Rubrik side, so no LACP or port channeling is required or supported. As far as switch port configurations, we have 2 options. All switch ports can be configured as access ports. If your network is routable and no VLAN tagging is required at the Rubrik port level, then we typically recommend to configure all switch ports as access ports. If VLAN tagging is required, we can have those switch ports configured as trunk ports with a native VLAN assigned. Multicast DNS and IPv6 must be enabled at the switch port level. These features are used for the initial discovery of the nodes. Once the nodes are discovered and clustered together, everything is converted back to IPv4 for production. Now we'll talk about the firewall requirements for a Rubrik deployment. Port 443 should be open to proxy.rubrik.com and logs.rubrik.com. This will allow Rubrik support tunnel access. The Rubrik support tunnel is how the support team or field team will be able to access the Rubrik nodes remotely to perform an upgrade or check any issue statuses. This is an outbound internet access only. Please reference the firewall port requirements section of the Rubrik user guide for specific rules for configuring various features and workloads. Now we'll talk about the cluster configuration requirements. First, we do require a cluster name for each cluster. This is a unique identifier for a specific Rubrik cluster. An example is Rubrik 1, Rubrik - the site name, or any other naming convention that you may follow. We require NTP and DNS IPs, and we ask that you provide multiple if applicable. We require an admin email address. This is the email address that will be used to log into the Rubrik GUI. And the IP requirements are listed here as well. For 10 gigabit data management, we require the subnet and gateway IP, as well as one IP per Rubrik node. And for the 1 gig IPMI, we require the subnet and gateway IP and one IPMI IP per node. In addition to the technical requirements of the Rubrik installation, there are some items to confirm around the logistics of the site visit as well. First, confirm that all hardware is delivered. This includes Rubrik hardware, switch infrastructure, cabling, transceivers, and anything else that the Rubrik deployment may be dependent on. Next, confirm we have the correct site address and site contact information. Confirm that there will be a networking resource available at the time of install that can assist with troubleshooting any customer network related issues. And finally, we'll want to confirm that there is a change request and/or data center access ticket processed and approved for the agreed upon date and time of install. Before wrapping up the pre-installation planning call, you'll want to review the project scope with the customer to ensure everyone is on the same page. There is a sample project scope listed here, which typically includes the physical brick installation and configuration, as well as a knowledge transfer training session. This scope can be updated as needed. At this point, all prereqs have been confirmed and the installation has been scheduled. Once on site, there may be a need for troubleshooting. The Rubrik support team has multiple resources that can assist. Here are a few different ways of contacting the Rubrik support team. And finally, we will review the pre-installation workbook in more detail. Thank you. Now I'd like to talk about the Rubrik pre-installation workbook. We created the Rubrik pre-installation workbook to cover all prerequisites of a Rubrik installation. The first tab here is the project summary and team sheet. This tab should be filled out in its entirety prior to the document being sent to a customer. It contains all Rubrik internal project information. As mentioned earlier, the solution narrative section is key for a successful handoff from the account team to the Rubrik PSO team and/or the partner team. The solution narrative should describe in detail the work needed to operationalize Rubrik into the customer's environment. This includes the type of workloads we are integrating and any additional customer expectations. The environment discovery sheet is critical to project success as it covers all of the Layer 1, Layer 2, and Layer 3 requirements of the installation. The Rubrik cluster info sheet outlines the specific information needed to perform the initial bootstrap of a Rubrik cluster. The remaining sheets are around the various features and products Rubrik offers and workloads that we integrate with. As you see, we have a sheet for VMware, Hyper-V, and AHV, which are our various hypervisors. We have a sheet for the VLAN tagging capability that we mentioned earlier. You can tag multiple VLANs from the 10 gigabit Rubrik ports. We have a sample switch config on how to assign that native VLAN with the trunk ports. We have sheets for various workloads, including Oracle, NAS, and SQL. And we have multiple sheets for various Rubrik products, including Rubrik Edge, Rubrik Cloud Out, Cloud On, and Cloud Cluster. Finally, we have hardware diagrams for our older R300 hardware, as well as our new R6000 hardware. We have a diagram of the various firewall port requirements. As mentioned earlier, this can also be found in the Rubrik user guide on page 514. The customer pre-install checklist outlines the specific information in this document all in one sheet, and this is required for a successful installation. And finally, we have the implementation summary that is delivered after the installation is complete. This will outline exactly what was completed and any additional action items. That will conclude my presentation on best practices around Rubrik PSO project planning and installation requirements. Thank you.